Okay, today we're going to talk about, eventually, Sefer Yeshayahu and a particular topic that we could trace throughout Tanach and throughout also Hazal as well. But in order to do that, I'm going to need to give you an introduction and the difficulty in dealing with Nivu'ah and how to interpret Nivu'ah. And once we have that background of the difficulty and different ways to do stuff, then I'm going to introduce you to a topic that's scattered throughout Tanakh and Hazal, and we'll talk about it and hopefully we'll come up with some interesting ideas. Before we do that though, I'm just going to open up with the following. I don't know how it's related, it's probably not, but it's just very interesting. When you talk about Yeshayahu, Yirmiyahu, and Yehezkel, if you want to get down to the essence of each book, you need to look no farther than their names. If you look at Yeshayahu, the name Yeshayah, redemption. Half the book he talks about the word Yeshua, redemption. If you look at Yirmiyahu, from the word bitterness, and he's going to be talking about the bitterness of destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. And if you talk about Yehezkel, he saw God, and he talks about Mar'eh HaNivu'ah. So we call him Yehezkel Haza'il. So it says something interesting. The essence of each Navi of the three Nevi'im, I couldn't figure out if it works in Shrei Asad as well. I don't necessarily think so. But definitely the three major Nevi'im, their essence is already hinted to in their names. So Yeshayah, we're going to be talking about, and being that Yeshayah is talking about Nivu'ot of redemption, he's going to be by far the most difficult one to understand exactly what he's talking about. So we'll start with something short. It's something very interesting. It's one of his most famous Nivu'ot. We'll start with something short, and I'll show you a couple of different ways to explain, and we'll trace it back all the way to the Talmud. So one of his most famous Nivu'ot is when he says, if you look at source 1 on the page, Ve'gad ze'ev im keves ve'namer im gedi yirbas ve'egel uchvir umri ahdav ve'nar katon noheg bam. And then he continues in the next pasuk, Ufarav adov tir'ayna yahdav yirbesu yaldehen va'yeh kabakar yuchal teven. And literally what it means, at the end of days, at some point in time, the lamb and the wolf are going to be living together. And a little child is going to be guiding a kefir, which is a baby lion, along with an egel, a baby cow. And then a bear and a cow are going to graze together in the fields. And aryeh kabakar yuchal teven, perhaps the most significant one, the aryeh, the lion, just like bakar, just like the cattle, is going to be eating straw. And if we take this literally, what we have here is God testifying through Yeshayah Navi that at the end of days, you're going to have a change in nature. The lion is no longer going to be a predator. It's going to be eating straw. All the animals are going to be able to live in peace together. They're not going to be eating each other. And then the next pasuk, there's one more pasuk. A baby is going to be able to play with snakes. And the last pasuk says, Lo yarev v'lo yashhitu bechol had kochi ke'mala'ah ha'aretz de'at Hashem kamayim layam echasim. Because the land is going to be filled with the wisdom of God. There's nobody who's going to come to fight each other, to destroy each other. Everybody's going to have this concept of mala'ah ha'aretz de'at Hashem. The Rambam in Hilchot Melachim takes a very different approach to this idea, and he says, whatever you do not understand this nivu'ah literal. God is not going to change the nature of a lion. A lion is always going to be a lion. It's always going to be eating other animals. It's not going to be eating straw. And animals are not going to live in harmony with each other. And wolf and lamb concept is not really true. What the Rambam says, he starts off as a very simple concept. If you begin in source 2, he says, Al ya'aleh al halev shebimot Mashiach yivatel davar minhago sha'olam. Number 1, let's start off. Nothing is going to change in the times of Yemot Mashiach. If this nivu'ah is a reference to the days of Mashiach, It's impossible that something mimin hagosh olam, something part of the natural fabric of the world, is going to change. It can't be. There's not going to be any change in what we call ma'aseh b'reshit in nature. Everything is going to be exactly how it always is. Maybe you'll have further technological advancements, but something within the framework of nature. And then he says, the world is going to be running like it always does. So, Begar ze'ev im kevis benamerim gediyud bas mashal v'chida. It's a mashal. It's a parable. It's not meant to be taken literally. And he says, what is the mashal? What is the inyan? Inyan hadavar shiyu Yisrael yoshvin labetach im rishei akum hamishulim kize'ev v'namer. The Jewish people are going to live in peace with the rest of the world. Now people are attacking us. They want our blood. Eventually, at the end of days, in the time of Mashiach, everybody's going to be living together. So who is the lamb? The Jewish people. The Ze'ev, the wolf, the Goyim who are attacking us. At the end of days, everybody's going to live together, and that's what it talks about at the end. Everybody's going to be on the same team. Everybody's going to be fearing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Nobody's going to be fighting with each other. That's all it means. And you have to be very careful, says the Rambam, to make sure that you don't interpret things that are literal. You have to make sure that you understand that they could be a mashal. Now, obviously, introducing the idea of mashal into the nivu'ah is something already specified in the Gemara, so it's what I named the source sheet, Uv mar'eh belo b'chidot, that Hashem tells Miriam and Aharon, when Hashem is going to speak to the Nevi'im besides Moshe, they're going to get their message in a hidah, in a riddle. They're not going to see it clearly. It's not going to be panim el panim kasher yedaber ish el re'ayehu. You're not going to speak face to face to someone. What do you mean? What are you talking about? No. They're going to be asleep. They're going to get a vision, and it's going to be some form of cryptic idea that they're going to have to figure out, and they're going to have to explain. And what is perhaps the most simplest demonstration of this concept? The first perek of Sefer Yirmiyahu. Hashem is initiating Yirmiyahu as an Navi, and he gives him the image. He shows him the images. He shows him these cryptic ideas that are happening, and he has to make sure Yirmiyahu understands how to interpret the mashal, how to interpret the parable, how to decipher the riddle. That's the job of an Navi, and then to convey the message to the people, if needed, with the code to decipher the riddle. The problem is, Sefer Yeshayahu, when he's talking about the nivu'ah of Geulah, and the redemption that is coming at the ultimate time, at the end of days, you don't need to decipher the riddle to the people. You're able to leave it open-ended. So whereas Yehezkel, Yirmiyahu, you're going to see an explanation to the mashal. So it's clear God is speaking to Navi b'derech mashal, and it's clear what the nimshal is going to be. Yeshayahu, you don't get any of that. You don't get the nimshal. There's no one to decipher it for you. So the Rambam is coming and saying, here, I'm identifying this as a mashal, which is because that's how Nivuah operates, and I'm going to tell you what it means too, in general sense. And he does put a disclaimer at the end. He says like this, V'chen kol kayoseh be'elu hadvarim b'yan hamashiach ha'mishalim, u'v'yimot hamelech hamashiach yivada l'kol le'ezeh davar haya mashal, u'ma'anyan ramzu bahen. Everything that we talk about when it comes to the Mashiach is a mashal, and you'll understand when it happens, you'll understand, oh, this is the interpretation of that parable. This is what it really means. Are we going to know now? No, not really. Rambam's approach. The Ravad is not so happy. He goes, I don't know what you're talking about. You're getting very fancy. But he says something very small, very simple. He goes, V'halo b'Torah is written, v'hishbati haya ra'a min ha'aretz. Okay, it's written v'hishbati haya ra'a min ha'aretz. Very nice, Ravad. What do you want? Now, step number one. What did we just say? We just made a difference between the Nivu'ah of the other Nevi'im and the Nivu'ah Moshe Rabbeinu. When it comes to the Nivu'ah Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't get cryptic messages. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't get parables. He doesn't get riddles. Moshe Rabbeinu gets a direct concept. So this pasuk that he's saying, and that's why he's stressing, it says in the Torah already, V'hishbati haya ra'a min ha'aretz. What does that mean, Hishbati haya ra'a min ha'aretz? Once the Jewish people are doing mitzvot, they're no longer going to be attacked by wild animals, which was a very interesting concern of the people back then. Before you have a gun that you could shoot the animal from 50 feet away, wild animals, arov, the fourth Makkah that happened in Egypt, they could be very devastating to a society. You look in Masechet Ta'anit, you see Hachamim talking about having Ta'aniyut and having public fast days on the level of Tisha B'Av because of an epidemic of wild animals attacking the people. So it's something, a major concern for the people. Hashem said, if you do the mitzvot, you're not going to have Hayara Amin Ha'aretz. So comes Ravan and says, Rambam, I don't know what you're talking about. They want to know what this means, that the animals are not going to be violent. It's a promise from the Torah already that the animals are not going to eat people. Very simple. It says it in the Torah already. And all it is, Yeshayahu speaking in more fancy poetical language, he's referring to this idea. Okay. We haven't seen yet, even if we take the Perush Ravad, Perush Rambam, the arguing over how to interpret, we haven't seen yet somebody actually arguing that there's a change in nature. But that's going to be source number 3. Source number 3 is what the Radak brings down, and he brings down a couple of interpretations on this pasuk. And the first interpretation is really the most interesting interpretation, because it shows you how much you're able to use what you've seen earlier in the Torah and try to use it and spin it in a different way, and then I could come out with an interpretation of what this means, that the wolf and the lamb are going to live in peace together. Says the Radak, go all the way back to Maaseh Bereshit. How many people? When the animals were created, how many of each animal was created? 2, Zachar and Nekeva, male and female, just like the human beings. Okay, I got 2 animals. What's going to happen if there's a predator and he attacks one of the animals? The species is going to die out. So you have to assume at a certain point in time, God placed a certain restriction on the animals to not attack each other. When Noah takes 2 of each species into the teva, Zachar and Keva, male and female, how are they going to reproduce? It has to be that it was within the teva, the nature of the animals, to not be predators. Yeah, you're forced to say so. Otherwise, there's no way they're going to be able to reproduce. Because if the first thing the lion attacks a zebra, then there's no more zebras. And we have to assume God wouldn't create the zebra that's for it to get eaten by the lion. He's interested in having a species called zebra. Okay, fair assumption. We'll take it one step further, though. If you look at the Torah, what happens when Noah comes out of the teva? All of a sudden, first time in history, they're allowed to kill animals. Humans are allowed to kill animals. So this could very well imply that beforehand we were living in some form of utopia where all the animals and all human beings were working along, were living in harmony. Nobody was being predatory. Nobody was killing anybody. Human beings were not allowed to hunt for meat. So it could very well be a different concept of what was. And it comes Yeshayahu Hanavi and tells us, you know what, at the end of days, we're going to return to that perfect world that once existed. The world became imperfect. That was part of the sins of the human beings before the Mabul. And Hashem had to restructure the world after the Mabul to allow human beings to eat meat. Okay. But now, Yeshayahu is telling you, you're going to go back to the original creations. And you know what? If I interpret it this way, it's very nice, sounds very nice, but I'm forced to say, according to this interpretation, there's going to be a change in the nature of the world, the nature of the world as you know it today. And it's going to revert back to its original state. I could use, it's not the first time Yeshayahu talks about this. Yeshayahu has another pasuk that says, "Vayomahu yeh or halivana ka'or hama." The light of the moon is going to be like the light of the sun. Now, if I want to interpret it literally and say there's going to be a change of nature, it's very, very reminiscent of the famous Midrash that when Hashem created the sun and the moon, He created Shnei Meorot HaGedolim, sun and the moon. And then, as the pasuk continues and it says, Et ha'ma'or ha'gadol l'mshelet hayom ve'et ha'ma'or ha'katon l'mshelet halayla. It talks about the big one, the big luminary, and the small one, the sun and the moon. But you just told me in the beginning of the pasuk they were Shnei Meorot HaGedolim. They were the two big ones. So you can answer very simply, the two big ones compared to all the other stars. It's not a big deal. But if you want to stick with the interpretation of Hachamim, what did they say? They were created the same size, and then God shrunk the moon. Okay, so Yeshayahu, when he's prophesying that at the end of days, the light of the moon is going to be like the light of the sun, I could interpret it literally. I have some form of basis to say that was the way the world was originally created. Or I could say the whole thing was a mashal and a hida, and including the first midrash, and say the sun of the moon was never the size of the moon was never the size of the sun. I could go whichever way I want, and it shows you the complexity when you're coming to deal with nevuah, when you're coming to deal with a mashal. A, should I identify it as a mashal, and then B, what is within the realm of possibility? According to the Rambam, you're limited. You have to make sure that every mashal that you're going to explain is going to be within the realm of the natural world as it exists today. According to the explanation we've seen from the Radak, not really. No, you're not beholden by that. And indeed, if you look at source number 4, it's actually a mahluket. What the Rambam says, and he famously says, "En ben ha'olam hazeh limota Mashiach ela shi'abud malchuyot bilvad," that the only difference between the time of Mashiach and our time now is going to be the fact that the Jewish people are not going to be subjugated by foreign nations. But in the natural terms of the world, no, there's not going to be any difference whatsoever. So obviously you'll have a Beit HaMikdash, that's part of not being subjugated to the foreign nations, that's fine. But the world as a natural world is going to continue to exist. That's the opinion of Shemuel in the Gemara. It argues with a different opinion. And that different opinion that tells you, if you look early in the Gemara, there's actual going to be a transformation in the nature of the world. It's a mahluket that goes back all the way 2,000 years ago to the times of the Gemara. So what do you do when it comes to interpreting a nivu'ah? Do I have to stick with the natural world? According to the Rambam, he likes that opinion in the Gemara. He tells you yes. According to other commentators, not necessarily. I'm not beholden by that. Maybe God can change the nature of the world. We have no idea. And that's why the Rambam tells you, we'll find out exactly what everything means once Mashiach comes. Okay? And then we'll know. So, but I want to introduce you to this idea of how vague it can be when you're coming to interpret a nivu'ah, how many different concepts we could have. We have one explanation that you have a lamb and a wolf is a mashal, is a parable to human beings living in peace together. You have other people interpreting it literally. They're going to create this concept of a change in the nature of the world. You're all over the map. So that's just a small example. Keep this idea in mind, because now I'm going to do something very different. We're going to go into a completely different area, an area that relates to Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av, area that relates to the concept of Hurban Beit HaMikdash, and we're going to trace something throughout the Tanach, and then through the statements of Hachamim, and we're going to see something very odd. And I'm going to start with Yeshayahu, because it's Yeshayahu, and he says like this. He's clearly giving a nivu'ah at the end of days. If you see, so starting from source number 5, he starts off, Kidvu goyim lishmawa ul'umim hakshivu. Tishma ha'aretz umlu'ah tevel v'chol tze'etzaeha. He's calling out to all the nations of the world. Everybody listen, I have a message for all of you. And what is his message? Ki ketzef ladonai al kol hagoyim. Hashem is angry with all of the goyim. And eventually he says, Ha'hirimam nitanam latavach. Hashem is going to slaughter them. God is going to take revenge against all the goyim. Who's this a message to? A general message to all the enemies throughout history of the Jewish people. The Nevuah continues. We don't need the next two Pesukim. It talks about various poetic forms of destruction. And then all of a sudden, Pasuk Hey, it starts talking about a specific nation. And it says, Kiri v'ta b'shamayim harbi, my sword is going to be filled, saturated with blood. Hine al Edom tirid, my sword, God says, is going to descend on Edom. Ve'al am hirbi mishpat, the nation that I consecrated is going to be my justice. I'm going to kill them all. And then he continues the thing. He says, Hayrav Hashem ala Adam, again, Zevach la Hashem beBotzra. Botzra is the capital city of Edom. Ve'tevach gadol be'eretz Edom. So somehow he went from talking about a general tevach, a slaughtering of the goyim, and somehow he became specific to Edom. Before we talk about that, I just want to show you, again, Yeshayahu repeats himself, and Perek Samech Gimel, again, Mizeh ba me'edom hamutz begadim miBotzra. He's coming, his clothes are all red from the blood that he's from the slaughter from Edom and Botzra. Again, you see the same two cities again. And then perhaps one of the weirdest ones we have is source number 7 in Tehillim 137. It says, it's talking about the destruction. The Mizmor famously opens up, Al Naharot Bavel. One Naharot Bavel. How do we end up on the river of Bavel? What event just happened? Galut from what? What? Yeah, which Horban? There's two of them, right? Bayit Rishon, okay? Obviously, we're talking about Bayit Rishon. That's why we're on Naharot Bavel. The Babylonians destroyed the first Beit HaMikdash. And they took us into captivity into Bavel. And all of a sudden, in Pasuk Zayin, we say, Zechora Adonai livnei Edom et Yom Yerushalayim. Hashem, remember for Bnei Edom et Yom Yerushalayim, Homrim Adu Adu Ad Haysod Ba, who was saying, uproot the Beit HaMikdash until its foundation. Oh, what's he talking about? Who destroyed the Beit HaMikdash again? Bavel. Not Edom. Where did Edom come from? What do we need to remember? Hashem should remember the sins of the nation of Edom. What are you talking about? Edom wasn't there. Oh, no problem. You're right. Edom wasn't there. Look at Pasuk. You're right. Bavel, we hope whatever you did to us, God should pay back to you. Oh, so it was Bavel. It wasn't Edom. So why are we talking about Edom? What's happening here in this pasuk? So here we have our second source. We have in Yeshayahu, God being angry at all the goyim and for some reason or another singling out Edom. And then we have in Tehillim, we have talking about the destruction of Beit HaMikdash. Somehow Edom finds its way in there. They're not supposed to be there. But don't worry, it's not the only source we have. It happens again in Ovadiah, Perek Aleph. Now the whole Ovadiah, there's only Perek Aleph in Ovadiah, but the whole Sefer Ovadiah is talking about this one concept. Yaakov versus Esav. And eventually, and I couldn't put the whole Perek on the page, but one of the last pasuk that he talks about is that at the end of days, and it's a pasuk we say every morning in Tefillah, they're going to come from the mountain of Sion, and they're going to go to the mountain of Esav, and then once they go and they judge the people of Esav, and Esav obviously is called in the Torah Edom, Esav Edom, very good. So once they go and they punish the people of Esav, then Vahitala Hashem Melucha. Then God is going to have the kingdom. He's going to be universally recognized. Okay, fine, very good. Look at the next one in Echa, and then we'll stop after this one and we'll analyze and see where we are. And it says this is okay, I'll tell you like this. In Echa, there's no mention of the destroyers of the Beit HaMikdash. If you do a search now in Megillah Echa, you won't find the word Bavel. What nation is mentioned? Tam avonech bat Sion, lo yosif lahaglotech. Sion, Yerushalayim, but Sion, your sins are completed. You suffered enough of your sins. Lo yosif lahaglotech. At a certain point in time, you're not going to be sent out to Galut anymore. You're going to receive payment in full for your sins, and then you're going to be redeemed. But pakad avonech ba Edom, gila hatotaich. Edom, you're going to go. The daughter of Edom, you're going to go in Galut. You're going to suffer for your sins. What are you talking about? You can't mention Bavel in 5 Perakim of Echa, but somehow Ba Edom serves again as the foil of the Jewish people. So we have here 4 different occurrences in Tanakh, and this is why it's significant. You have it occurring in multiple Nevi'im, you have it occurring in Tehillim, you have it occurring in Echad, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, different books, different time periods, and you have this common denominator here that the ultimate enemy is Edom. Now I'll demonstrate the idea a little bit further. In Yeshayahu, from Perek Vav until about Perek Lamed, they talk about Nevuot on all these Goyim. And Yeshayahu is prophesying on all different nations. The one nation that doesn't get a prophecy is Edom. Doesn't get a prophecy. Okay? So it's really odd that much later, Edom and Perek Lamed, Perek Samech Gimel, Edom for some reason or another is specified as being this nation that God is going to go and personally take care of. God is going to take a sword, his clothing are going to become filled with blood. It's very odd. So we have to pause for a moment and say, what do we know about Edom throughout Jewish history, throughout Tanakh? Were they the nation that was really attacking us and destroying us and causing us problems? And lo and behold, if you just read a little bit of Tanakh, what are you going to find? What's the relationship between the Jewish people and Edom? No. In the Tanakh, in Melachim. Jewish people and Edom. Edom is a vassal state of Malchut Yehudah. Right? And it constantly says, in these days, Edom rebelled against Yehudah, but they're really not a factor. The opposite. From the times of David HaMelech, who captures Edom, they're a vassal state of Malchut Yehudah. They're not a factor whatsoever. They're never our main enemy. Who's the main enemy? You have Ashur coming, you have Bavel coming. Edom is a vassal state of the Jewish people, and they go to war together against Moab. You have the king of Israel, the king of Yehudah, and the king of Edom going to war against Moab together. So what are we talking about here in this sense? That what are we really talking about? There's really, Edom is an insignificant speck when it comes to our international relationships. And all of a sudden, they're the one we're going to single out for the Hurban Beit HaMikdash, which they had nothing to do with. And they're the ones that God is going to ultimately give his vengeance upon and fill his sword, saturate his sword with blood. That's what's going on in Tanakh. If we go to the Talmudic literature, it's going to get a little bit more complicated. And it's throughout, by the way, it's throughout the Talmud, it's throughout Divrei Hazal, constantly, the ultimate enemy is Edom. So look at this one, for instance. In Masechet Megillah, Dafav Amud Aleph, there's a lot of different statements. I just chose you one. They say, Kesareh v'Yerushalayim. Now, what's Kesareh? Seemingly you would interpret it Caesarea. Right? If you look early in the Gemara, you really can't. It makes no sense because they talk about Caesarea, Kesareh being this place where you have kings coming out of. Who built Caesarea? Okay. What do we know about Herod? He was affiliated with Rome. No. Rome. What do you know about him? He was a slave from Edom biologically, but who's helping build Caesarea? Let's look at the name Caesar. Rome, right? And he had this foreign national policy relationships with Rome. Now, why don't I care that Herod is actually an Edomite? Because it's not going to solve anything that I've dealt with in the Tanakh. It's not going to solve the problem of associating Edom as the ultimate enemy. Meaning that people who want to say Edom becomes the ultimate enemy in Divrei Hazal, all as a response to Herod, who's an Edomite. Doesn't make any sense, because you're not going to answer what's going on in the Mikra itself. So it has to be much deeper than that. And also because the statements continue way post Herod's time. We're talking about way post second destruction. We're talking about in the Talmud. We're talking about up to 600 CE. Herod's no longer around, I can tell you that much. So why do we have these statements about Edom? So they're talking about Caesarea and Yerushalayim, but seemingly it's a reference to Rome. Okay, based on earlier in the Gemara, and we'll see that's what they're talking about. They're constantly going to contrast Rome and Yerushalayim, and they say the statement is like this: if they're both actually destroyed, don't believe the statement. if both are actually settled and thriving, don't believe the statement. They have to exist in a situation in which one is destroyed and one is settled. One is thriving, one is not. Always. They have this inverse relationship. It has to be the situation, says the Gemara. And then they bring a pasuk. The first pasuk they bring is Ilmaleh HaHorava, and it has nothing to do with talking about Rome. Obviously, it's a pasuk. I forget from one of the Trei Asad. Nothing to do with Rome. And the pasuk is talking about a city called Sord. Sord is Phoenicia in northern Israel. How'd they get there? Obviously, they're just using it, they're manipulating the pasuk to talk about Rome and Yerushalayim. That's what they want to talk about. And they tell you, if one is settled, the other one has to be destroyed. Okay. Then they bring a second pasuk. And this pasuk is more interesting. This is the pasuk I want to focus on. And Rav Nachman Be'Yitzhak Amar Mehachal, Om Mil'om Ye'ematz. Where was it said, this pasuk, Om Mil'om Ye'ematz? Toldot, Rivka was told this by when she asked Hashem, what's going on in my stomach? And Hashem said, you're going to have two nations within you. These two nations are going to fight each other, and one is always going to be on top of the other. But wait a minute, who are those two nations? Esav and Yaakov. So Yaakov, Yerushalayim, I got that connection. So now what we're doing here, we're now taking this connection, Esav, who's Edom, and we saw in the Tanach we're randomly and generously sprinkling out reference to Edom whenever we want. Now we're making a connection to Esav being Rome. We just jumped from Esav, Edom, which is in the biblical text, but I don't know why they talk about Edom. And now all of a sudden I have a second question. They're now associating Esav with Rome. Rome, what do we know about Rome? What did they do? They destroyed the second Beit HaMikdash. Okay? So obviously they go down, and history is not a pleasant people for the Jewish people. They were enemies. But do we ever associate Bavel? Ask yourselves the following question. Do we ever associate Bavel with Esav? No. We have Edom, we have Bavel, separate in the Tanakh. For some reason, they seem to merge in this weird way in Mizmor, Kuf Lamed Zayin, like we saw. But they're clearly separate entities. Now when it comes to Rome, we're saying Rome is Edom. And that's the only way you can make sense of the pasuk he's bringing here. And then you'll see in the next pasuk, in the next statement in the Talmud, in Masechet Gitin, it's talking about the Caesar Nero. He sent out arrows to see which city to attack, and somehow the arrow always fell out on the direction of Yerushalayim. He said, okay, I gotta go attack Yerushalayim. But before he left, he asked a baby or a child, and he says, what pasuk are you learning? And he answers this pasuk following v'natati et miknati be'edom b'yad ami Yisrael. And pasuk from Yeshayahu, I'm going to have the vengeance that I'm going to take out on Edom through the Jewish people. They're going to take revenge upon Edom. And then then the Caesar starts complaining to God, what do you want me to do? You're telling me I have to attack Yerushalayim, now you're telling me I'm going to get punished. What are you talking about you're going to get punished? Who's Edom? You're Rome. No. Edom and Rome are the same. In Hazal, they're the same. And then you see the next statement of the Talmud is actually very interesting, because it addresses this mizmor of Kuf Lamed Zayin. Why are you talking about Edom and Bavel? So Hahamim, once they interpret Edom as being a reference to Rome, have no problem. The mizmor makes perfect sense. How does Mizmor make perfect sense? If you read it in the Gemara, it talks about the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash by Bavel. That's Beit HaMikdash number 1. And it also references the Beit HaMikdash destruction of the second Beit HaMikdash by Edom. Okay, what's the problem? Tehillim was written before? No problem. He had Ruach HaKodesh. And now, as he was staying on the banks of Bavel, he foresaw also this destruction of the second Beit HaMikdash. And that's why Edom is written there. No problem, because they destroyed the second Beit HaMikdash. They didn't. Rome did. No. Edom and Rome are the same. Okay. So we have two separate issues. I just want to make that clear. We have two separate issues. We have number one, the issue of why Edom is really randomly singled out in the Tanakh as being the ultimate enemy of the Jewish people. And then we have in Divrei Hachamim, we all of a sudden made Edom into Rome. But we have to be clear. Besides that pasuk in Kuf Lamed Zayin, when you want to say it's Beruach HaKodesh, it's going to be very difficult to say that the other, when you're talking about the Megillah Echa, that somehow when we mention Edom, we're making a reference to Rome. None of it happened yet. Of course, if I wanted to interpret all these Pesukim b'derech nevuah, the Pesukim in Yeshayahu b'derech nevuah, and I say he's referring to Galut Edom, which is Rome, he's referring to Galut, meaning Yeshayahu is speaking first Beit HaMikdash, prior to its destruction. So the Beit HaMikdash is going to be destroyed by Bavel. They're going to return to Eretz Yisrael. They're going to build the second Beit HaMikdash. It's going to be destroyed by Rome. And Yeshayahu is speaking about this time, and he's calling them Edom. We can interpret it that way. You know who gets very angry about that? The Ibn Ezra. It's a phenomenal Ibn Ezra. And he starts off, and he says, וישנם שלא הקיצו או וישנים שלא הקיצו משנת האיוולת יחשבו כי אנחנו בגלות אדום. He's very strong, he has very strong language. And he says the people are still sleeping, and they're sleeping in stupidity, think that we're in Galut Edom. And by the way, you'll hear this all the time. What he's referring to is a common phrase that you'll hear. We speak about the Arba Galuyot, with the 4 different exiles. So we have the exile of Bavel, we have the Galut of Yavan, of Greece, that's a story of Hanukkah. We have the Galut of either Egypt or Persia, depends upon how you want to count it. And then the 4th Galut is always going to be Galut Edom. And Galut Edom, we interpret that's today's times, where we're living under the Galut of Christianity. How does Edom become extended to Christianity? Very simple. Once I identify Edom as being Rome, which we're still not sure how we do so, the second the Roman emperor and the whole empire converts to Christianity and now takes on a life of its own. So we know, even though Rome might have gotten destroyed and the Roman Empire no longer exists, its natural descendant is Christianity. And Christianity, we were under the Galut of Christianity, and we could extend the idea of Christianity to the concept of the Western world. And that's the way we make the links, going from Esav, which is Edom, which becomes Roman rabbinic literature, which becomes Christianity, and Hahami were very well aware of this at their time in the Gemara, which becomes Christianity. So now I no longer need to speak about the Roman Empire anymore. I can speak about Christianity as a whole, which becomes Western Europe, which is all Christian, and then it becomes the Western world that we live in today. And that's how we make the leaps. And so you're asking what Galut we're in. Has there ever been a change in the world's superpowers? Not really. It's all the same idea. That's how we view it, and that's why we talk about the 4 Galuyot. The second, once Rome destroys the second Beit HaMikdash, we're in Galut Rome today. Hasn't changed. And we're going to call Rome Edom. That's how it generally works. Ibn Ezra is taking issue with this concept. And he says, I don't know what you're talking about. You guys are insane. How could you possibly say we're in Galut Edom? Now watch what he says. I'm going to read it inside because it's very interesting. He says, Rak Edom lo chen hadavar. It's definitely not true. Rak Edom hayat tahat yad Yehuda. Like we said earlier, they were a vassal state to Yehuda. V'chen katuv v'isha Edom mitachat yad Yehuda. And then in the middle of Melachim, they rebelled against Yehuda and we went to attack them. V'gam Yoav hichri kol zachar be'Edom. Yoav kills all the males in Edom. So they're really not a factor whatsoever. Yoav, the general of David HaMelech. He says, Uba'avur shehaya tahat yad Yehuda samhu biyom edenu. Since they were vassal states of Yehuda, they got very excited on our terrible day when the Beit HaMikdash got destroyed. And that's how he explains the pasuk, Vayu omrim lebavliim aru aru ad haisod ba. You know why we saw in Mizmor Kuf Lamed Zayin a mention of Edom? Because Edom, who were subservient to Yehuda, once Bavel is destroying the Beit HaMikdash, they can't wait. It's these Babylonians are destroying these people who are ruling over them. Please destroy further. Knock out the building all the way to the foundation. They're very happy. And now the Ibn Ezra explains Mizmor Kuf Lamed Zayin. Why is Edom mentioned? That's because they got very happy at the destruction. And he goes so far as to say, psychologically, the actual destruction paled in comparison to the fact that Edom, who used to be their slaves, were now laughing at them. Oh, interesting. V'chen ta'am sisi v'simchei bat Edom. And then he quotes a pasuk from Echad Abiso. And that's why we reference Edom. Because we were more angry at them, and it was more humiliating, the humiliation we suffered, that these people who we used to rule over are, now saying, ha ha ha, you got destroyed, as opposed to the people who actually destroyed the Beit HaMikdash. This is the approach of the Ibn Ezra, how he's going to solve these two pisukim. And then he starts talking about, and this is where it gets very interesting, he needs to explain somehow this association of Edom and Rome. But he solved the problem in the Tanach, correct? At this point in time, you know why Edom gets mentioned? Because they were happy at the destruction of the Jewish people during the first Beit HaMikdash. Don't start thinking the Rome, they destroyed the second Beit HaMikdash. Please don't do any of that. Please, the Ibn Ezra tells you. Okay. And then he goes on eventually to tell you, he starts talking about who destroyed the second Beit HaMikdash, and he said the Kittim, the descendants of Malchut Yavan, and the Romans, they have nothing to do with Edom. And then eventually he says like this, go to the third to last line. V'hayu anashim metei mispar shehe'eminu be'emunah hadasha. There was a small band of people who believed in this new religion. What religion is he referring to? Christianity. And at the time when Constantine, the emperor of Rome, converted Rome to Christianity, the only small band of people who were following Christianity prior to Rome converting to Christianity were Edomiyim. How does he know this? Can you prove that? There's not a chance he could prove that. Okay? Why is he saying it? He needs to make the link on how Edom is called Christianity. So it goes like this. Christianity was being practiced by a small group of Edom. When Rome converts to Christianity, then somehow, look what he's going to say. And then somehow it became called Edom, because they were the small group of people who were Christian. So when they all convert to Christian, they're called after that small group of Edom. Okay, if it convinces you, fine. No, that doesn't work for me personally. What can I say? So I'm going to suggest something within the spirit of what we've seen before. The concept of mashal and hida. But before I get there, we have to understand why we would use a mashal and hida to use Edom as the foil for the Jewish people throughout history. And look what I'm saying now. In the time of Yeshayahu, in the time of Tehillim, in the time of Echa, they're constantly used as the foil of the Jewish people, even though they weren't really physically there. Even Islam wants to say they were. Okay, you could say they were, right? But really, it doesn't make sense that you're going to mention Edom over Bavel because the psychological damage was worse than the physical damage of the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. Difficult to say. So that's why I'm going to have an interesting approach here. But first, note, why are we constantly singling them out as the foil of the Jewish people in Tanach? Because what do we know in Tanach already? We have a pasuk that when it talks about the beracha that Yitzhak gives Esav, he tells him the following. You're going to live by the sword, and you're going to be subservient to your brother. When he's going to tarid, whatever that word means, you're going to be able to break off from under his yoke, and you're no longer going to be subservient to him. So meaning, there's some form of relationship here. Yaakov is going to be on top of Esav. Yitzhak tells Esav, he's always going to be on top of you, except that when Yaakov is tarid, or Esav is tarid, we'll see, it depends how you want to interpret that word. And then Esav is going to be he's no longer going to be subservient to Yaakov. And keep in mind, we saw earlier, the two nations are constantly going to be fighting each other. We have here this eternal struggle. And look how Targum Unkulus interprets this pasuk. What does it mean, Kasher Tarid? It says like this. Right, that's what we saw earlier. That you're going to live by your sword, you're going to worship your brother. When the children of Yaakov are going to violate the words of the Torah, they're no longer going to be loyal to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. At that point in time, at that point in time, you're going to be able to break free. Meaning the Jewish people or Yaakov's control over Esav is something that's dependent upon his spiritual nature. And this is something true in general with the Jewish people. The whole Torah is, everything when it comes to the Jewish people is dependent upon the spiritual nature. So including this, if the Jewish people are following the mitzvot of the Torah, then Edom is going to be subservient to them. And by the way, you see that in Melachim. The first country, one of the first countries David subdues is Edom. They're following the words of the Torah. As they go further and further, and they stop following the laws of the Torah, eventually Edom rebels against the Jewish people, and they're no longer able to control them. It's a spiritual thing at force here. The Jewish people have the ability to decide if Edom is going to be under their reshut or not. And what Yitzhak created here through these words, and it's also God by talking about these two different nations, what we create here is the perfect foil for the Jewish people. You want to talk about the Jewish people performing mitzvot and doing the right thing? God is going to help them so much that Esav is going to be destroyed. Esav represents, the destruction of Esav represents the success of the Jewish people and following the mitzvot of the Torah. When the opposite happens and we find Esav all of a sudden coming into the Hurban, because Esav also represents the failure of the Jewish people to heed to the word of God. Esav is a symbol here. The more the Jewish people are observant of the words of the Torah, Esav is going to be subdued. The pasuk in Obadiah, "Va'alu Moshe b'har Sion, lishpot et har Esav, v'yital Adonai melucha." When the opposite happens and the Jewish people are not following the mitzvot of the Torah, Edom's going to come into play. Now the question is, that's right now I didn't say anything, right? That's obvious, that's from the text. The question is as follows. Does it need to be the literal Edom? Does it need to be the biological Edom? And I'll start by saying like this. There's a mitzvah in the Torah to destroy Amalek. Mehiyat Amalek. There's also a mitzvah in the Torah to destroy a different group of people, and that is Shivat Amamim, the 7 nations inhabiting Eretz Israel. There's no difference in the mitzvah of which we're commanded to destroy the 7 nations and the mitzvah in which we're commanded to destroy Amalek. Something very interesting happens in the Rambam, Sefer Melachim, when he talks about these laws. And he says like this, there's a mitzvah aseh from the Torah to destroy the 7 nations, and then he goes, today this mitzvah is no longer applicable. One Sanheriv came, the king of Ashur came, and he mixed up all the different nations. He moved these people here, these people there, these people there. There's no longer a concept of the 7 nations anymore, and this mitzvah is no longer applicable today. When he talks about the destruction of Amalek, which is the next halakha in Hilchot Melachim, he goes, there's a mitzvah aseh to destroy Amalek. And he doesn't go out of its way to tell you it's no longer applicable today. And seemingly, it's clear according to the Rambam, there's still a mitzvah to destroy Amalek. Now, personally, I could explain this very simply. Amalek is a genetic thing, and the Shiva Amamim is a din in a nation. Meaning there's no nation of the Shiva Amamim anymore. There still could be biological descendants, but they don't function as a nation. Amalek, I'm not interested in the nation of Amalek. I need you to eradicate the biological gene of Amalek. That could be a very simple answer to the solution. But they Rabbi Soloveitchik brings down a very interesting interpretation, and it's an interpretation that we use all the time when it comes to Amalek. And we talk about Hitler being from Amalek, we talk about Saddam Hussein being from Amalek, and what we do, we say Amalek is a concept. Amalek is a concept of evil in the world. And we take Amalek, the physical nation, to be a symbol. So even though Shaul HaMelech wipes out Amalek, we always have Amalek, because you always have evil in the world. Any evil in the world that's anti-Malchut HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Amalek. It's a concept. It's, in a certain in words, if we could say so, it's a mashal. We're not talking biological, and Rabbi Soloveitchik wants to posit that it's actually the meaning of the halacha to resolve the contradiction in the Rambam. He's not speaking in a conceptual sense, speaking in a practical sense. This is how I'm going to resolve the contradiction of the Rambam. Amalek exists as an idea, not just a biological concept. Okay. What's the relationship between Esav and Amalek? Amalek is the grandson of Esav. Hey. So now I'm going to ask you the question. And really this is my closing thoughts on the matter. If we're willing to conceptualize Amalek and talk about a mitzvah from the Torah being applicable in today's time, because even though the biological people don't exist, the Torah was telling us you have to eradicate the concept of Amalek, the evil people. Is it's now so far-fetched to say that when we're talking not in the mitzvah concept, when we're talking about an explanation of Divrei Hachamim and in the Tanach itself, that we're conceptualizing Esav and Edom. And it's very interesting because if we say this, we could say this in the Midrash, we're conceptualizing somebody fine, but what's interesting, and I want to claim that what's happening, is the Tanakh itself is actually doing this. Again, we speak in Mashal, we speak in Hidah. So the same way when it's talking about a lamb and a sheep, it doesn't mean according to the Rambam a lamb and a sheep. It means human beings being in peace with each other. When God is going to attack Edom, and his sword is going to be filled with blood, who said we're forced to say it's the biological Edom that we know in the Tanakh? It could very simply be the concept of the foil of the Jewish people. The fact the people that represent, when the Jewish people are not following the Torah, the people who are on top of them, who are able to destroy them, who are able to exile them. It's the opposite of when the Jewish people are successful. So you want to call Bavel Edom? Go ahead, it's the same idea. When we talk about it in Tehillim, we talk about Edom, we talk about Bavel, because Bavel has transferred at that point in time in history to being the Edom of the time, to being the foil of the Jewish people, to being the people who are going to represent what happens when the Jewish people do not follow the laws of the Torah. What we saw, Ishaq's promise to Yaakov, there's always going to be people who are going to remind the Jewish people of not following the laws of the Torah. We're going to call them all Edom. We're going to call them all Esav. So at the end of days, what do you need to have happen? We're going to take revenge against our enemies. You know why Yeshayahu is singling out Edom? Because when he talks about Edom, remember, keep in mind, especially in Perek Lamed Daled, he talked about Mishpat LaHashem al Kol Hagoyim. He's talking about the whole world. All enemies of the Jewish people are called Edom. He's not singling out anybody. He's generalizing by using the word Edom. And now we no longer have that conflict. Where's Edom coming from? And we talk about Megillat Echa, and we say, Tam avonech bat Zion lo yosif lahaglotech. You know who's going to suffer now? Edom. What do you mean, bat Edom? The people who represent the enemies of the Jewish people, who were created by the Jewish people, failing to live up to the ideals of the Torah. Edom is the enemy that Jewish people create. The same way Esav had that power that when Yaakov stops worshiping HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Esav, you're going to break free, you're going to be the counterbalance. So too, it doesn't need to be specifically Esav, because who's creating Esav? Yaakov. That's the key. We create our own enemies. So Edom is, when every time you see Edom, what it means to tell you is, it's your fault. You guys have caused this. You guys haven't followed in the ways of the Torah. This is the enemy that you've created. Now take it back to rabbinic literature. Of course, when they need to talk about the enemy and this eternal enemy and this eternal, this seemingly eternal galut in which we're in, of course we're going to use Edom. It's Christians, it's Rome, they have nothing to do with Edom, they're in Italy, and then we're going to extend the concept. It doesn't matter. It's all the same idea. It's all the Jewish people's struggles. It all comes down to the fact that we're not loyal to the mitzvot of the Torah. If you were loyal to the mitzvot of the Torah, we wouldn't be here. The fact that we're not loyal to the mitzvot of the Torah, we're in Galut, that automatically makes the people who are putting us into Galut, Edom. Now we can only do this concept once we're sure that that we're able to make a hidah, make a mashal. And that's why it's important when you're dealing with Sefer Yeshayahu, you're familiar with the idea. Once you're familiar with the idea, and then you could have some fun. It could be we're wrong. Yeah, again, like the Rambam says, no one's going to know. It's fine. We have no idea. And in what the Mashiach, he actually says in the next halakha too. I didn't bring it on the source sheet because I ran out of room. But he says really no one has any idea when it comes to any of this stuff. But I think at least here the problem is confounded. It's interesting. It's a problem that begins in the Tanach and then develops in Divrei Hamim. And there's really no relationship to the situations in which they find themselves. So that's why I wanted to suggest this. Normally we talk about the Midrash sometimes, we talk about the Tanakh sometimes, but this is interesting. You have the Tanakh and the Midrash following in the same vein, constantly using the same metaphorical enemy. Because it has nothing to do with the enemy. It has to do with the Jewish people. If you read anything about any work describing the Jewish people, you read Melachim, you read Echad, you read any form of destruction of the Jewish people, it's always our fault. But never interested in what our enemies actually did. We don't need to care about Edom. We don't need to care about Rome. We don't need to care about Christianity. What we need to do is turn it into ourselves. And by constantly calling the enemy the same name, that I could trace all the way back to the beginning of the Torah, what the Tanakh has enabled us to do, what Hazal have enabled us to do is say, hello, look at Esav, Yaakov. What's the relationship? There is none. It's all dependent upon what Yaakov does. And constantly telling us, ignore the enemy, focus on ourselves. If there's a lesson to focus on these upcoming 3 weeks, what we should do is focus on ourselves, ignore the political situations, the enemies. Let's take a step back and see, where are we? What do we need to do to go closer to Hashem, to fulfill this, to make sure we're not fulfilling the pasuk, and making sure we'll be able to fulfill the first of the pasuk, Amen.